Well, shortly after replacing the fuel pump back on the engine, I found a fuel leak here on the low pressure side. So to kind of walk you through it here, the lifting pump comes up here from the fuel filter and comes around, gets pumped through the other secondary filter here. It then comes out this line to the high pressure pump where it gets fed into the engine. And then there's two return lines here that bring fuel back and kind of keep the cycle moving. Unfortunately, there is a burst pipe down under here, which is actually quite common on these kinds of fuel lines. So I'm going to have to take those off. I've got new line available to bend and shape into the correct size, and we'll put it back together and hopefully she'll run. Okay, so I've got the fuel lines off. This is the one that was leaking. It was leaking from right where I broke it. The line had actually kind of just worn through at that point. It was rubbing against an oil line, and I suspect that rubbing over the last 45 years is what inevitably just broke it. I had to snap it to get it out of there, out of the engine. The way it was routed, there was no alternative. So it's off, the other one is off, and I've got them ready to go. I've got this pipe bending tool I borrowed from a neighbor, as well as the replacement olives and fittings there. So the plan is to bend the pipe into shape, find a flaring tool. I'm probably going to have to take it to a mechanic to have them flare it properly. And once these are flared and ready to reinstall, I'll throw a coat of blue paint on them so that they don't get corroded, and it should be good to go. So one thing I really didn't want to have to do was take the manifold off, but when I got the pipes bent and tried to install them, I found that there is no safe way to do that without accidentally damaging them. So I have both of them kind of in and test fitting. I'm going to have to make a few small adjustments to the bends and get them perfectly fit. While I'm at it, I also wanted to pull the thermostat out because I have a hot spot developing. And one of the ways that you can check if the water pump is working is if you pull the thermostat out, you can check the circulation within the cooling tank. So the next step for this project is to have the fittings put on and the ends flared. Once they are flared, I'll come back and continue working. So I did my research on these flared ends, and it turns out this is probably just one of many things that will work for this project. So I'm going to take these to a diesel mechanic with the new pipe and get their opinion on it. This is not something that I feel qualified to do, and I definitely don't have the tooling to do, so it has to be done professionally. And that depends on my work schedule as well as the work schedule of the mechanic. So it might be a while before I get this done. Finally have some solid progress here. I have the two fuel lines routed from the fuel filter underneath the oil lines and hardware over to the fuel pump. I double checked in the manual to make sure that the inlet and outlet were on the correct sides. So the next step will be to get the ends flared by a professional. So sometime this week I'm going to have to go and find a professional to do that. And we'll update again when I come back and do that. So I have the olives and nipples on both ends of both pipes. They are bent and shaped into the final form. So the final step will be to put a layer of primer on them. so that they don't rust, and then I will install them. One cool thing I found that I want to try is I have electrical spiral wrap. I'm going to put that around the corners here where the pipe is going to experience a lot of abrasion from surrounding equipment. And by putting that spiral wrap around the tubing, I'm hoping that it will protect the tubing itself from abrasion, because that is how the previous one failed. To flare the ends of the pipe to keep the whole assembly together, I borrowed this flaring tool from a friend of mine, and I have a little short piece of pipe in there I'm going to demonstrate with. So all this really does is it wedges the pipe between a cone and a hollow tube part, and by screwing down onto it, you get a very nice flare at the end of your pipe. So there's our sample of a flared pipe there. Originally it had that weird beveled flare, but in my research I found that the regular single flare works just as well. In fact, I found a picture of a fuel line from a Perkins 4.108 from the past that had the single flare fuel line. So I'm okay with going with this design because it is easier and there is no tool available to help put in that weird bulbousy flare. Well, this project has been going on for way too long, and I'm not really interested in showing you guys the painting steps because you've already seen that, and the reinstallation is pretty much just putting it back together. So I'm going to cut this video off here, and feel free to comment down below if you have any questions. Bye!
It took 4 months, but it's running great!